It is Friday, December 26th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Christmas episode of LTPS. Now, small little disclaimer here. Obviously, LTPS falls on a Friday after Christmas, but I film on Christmas, which I don't want to do, so I'm filming early. And that should work out fine because I don't think we're going to miss any major news stories. It's been relatively quiet, so we don't have that much to go over, but still some things to discuss as always. And so let's begin with first our PS Plus reminder, which the December PS Plus Essential games are still live on PSN. Make sure you claim those. Going into our first news story, however, we do have a very timely new Welcome Hub background. A nice little snowy background with the PlayStation symbols in there as well. Goes along nicely with the fireplace-looking one that Sony put out the previous week, which that one had sound effects. This one does not, but at the very least, I love that we're getting more Welcome Hub backgrounds released on a regular cadence. It's still only for the Welcome Hub, but it does pair quite nicely with the current beta where you can let the widgets disappear if you're looking into the Welcome Hub widgets. So still would be better if it was not that picky on where you're looking, but hey, there you go. At least it's a nice little bonus. Now moving on to the PlayStation Studios game, Gran Turismo 7, which has been doing very, very well and growing at a somewhat unusual pace as far as the monthly active users, because typically live service games are this reverse effect where they do well initially. If they do find a player base, rather, they will do well right off the bat and then sort of trickle down over time. Some games can hold that player base longer than others, but usually at some point the player numbers fall down a bit. Gran Turismo 7, however, has been doing much better. So speaking at the Gran Turismo World Series 2025 finals in Fukuoka, Polyphony Digital's Kazunori Yamauchi said the game is at 2 million monthly active users only on PlayStation 5. Quote, Gran Turismo 7 has been released for several years, but still, the active users are currently over 2 million people, and the new users are increasing. The status that Gran Turismo 7 is in now is probably the best of any Gran Turismo titles that we've had in the past. We've never experienced this phenomenon before, and neither has PlayStation. And so that would speak volumes to Polyphony's commitment to this game. They do monthly updates very often, new cars, cafe menus. They've got the big Spec 3 update that came out, the new big content drop as well. And yeah, GT7 has been, I don't know if a renaissance is the right word here, but like it has been steadily accumulating more players over time. And the game regularly is on sale, but it's never been like super cheap either. So the game is probably very healthy at this point where Sony's making some good money, selling a bunch of in-game credits for the cars too, and then also up to 2 million monthly active users, which is very impressive and also a metric we rarely ever get because the game is only on PlayStation 5. Almost always when we're talking about player numbers, we're going off a Steam number because that's all public data. Internally for first-party games, unless they give out those metrics willingly, and they don't do that, we never hear about that stuff. So that is fascinating to hear. Gran Turismo historically has always been a very successful, very strong property for PlayStation. Some people seem to completely overlook just how many copies GT games sell on PlayStation consoles. GT3, for example, on PS2 did astronomical numbers. It was like 30 million plus, something like that. Can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it seems as though GT7 is doing quite well. And now I'm just, again, very curious as to where the franchise goes for a next mainline numbered entry. Is that the one where they do plan to ship that on PC? Are they kind of still considering that for GT7? I'm wondering where they go from there. Moving on to some more video game sales data, where this one looks a little bit better versus the report last week about the US and its very abysmal November performance, and that was across all manufacturers. This time around in the UK, reported by Christopher Dring, citing numbers from the GfK, which tracks video game sales data in the UK, we have corrected numbers for November, so initially this was wrong, but the proper numbers is that PS5 console sales are down 41% year-on-year. Switch 2 and 1 combined are up 41%, so probably the more pertinent item there as far as video game news, because that's what was so bleak about the US numbers too, is that Switch 2 as a new platform going into its first holiday cycle, combined with Switch 1, was down 10% compared to Switch 1's 2024, but I digress. The point is, Switch 2 and 1 up 41%, and Xbox was unsurprisingly down 51% as well, and this was excluding Black Friday's impact, so Oddly enough, we don't have a full proper view of the numbers here, but overall console sales were down 17%. So it's contextually kind of fits with every single platform. Xbox down, PS5 down. It's in its fifth year, so it's very hard for it to ever sort of have a reverse decay curve, as we often say. Switch 2, expectedly, you would think, is going to be doing reasonably well for it being a new platform into its first holiday cycle. So not nearly as front-loaded as we were discussing for the US situation, because the console is like readily in stock, and that's the great thing about Switch 2 in this case. The other thing is simply driving the point across home that we talked about previously, and that it's all based on regions. Some are going to look a lot better than others, and here in the US it's been pretty tough. Now what's also tough is Japan, so we also have some recent Famitsu numbers for console sales last week, I believe, and that new PS5 digital edition Japanese language only discounted model, which is still not as cheap as the console was when it launched, is not really doing all that well. So initially we did see that big multiplier when the console originally came out, but now it's sold, all PS5 hardware sales combined were at about 18,900 units, so just under 19,000, which going back to last year around the same time frame, they had sold 21,000 units, and that was when PS5 Pro was introduced, so that console was contributing about 5,000 units for that particular week, which is somewhat impactful given that the numbers are very low to begin with. But, arguably, I guess you could say that the discounted model available this holiday season stopped some bleeding, because it would probably be even worse without it being there. But you can see that, console sales in Japan in particular for Sony have still been very tough for PlayStation 5. It's still something where, what can they really do? I mean, that's sort of the Band-Aid fix they had, and it's still something that they probably should have done. But really, I'm at this point, I just think, man, let's see this handheld. In 2 years, what is that going to do for that marketplace? Because the other tough thing, right, that handheld will be very compelling to the Japanese marketplace. It's still not going to have the Mario, the Zelda, Pokemon games. I mean, at the end of the day, Nintendo first party also heavily carries and bolsters Switch hardware sales. So even with Sony having a handheld, will that still be a compelling enough offer in that it's the high performance handheld where you can play Monster Hunter? Will we have a sort of PSP situation all over again, where just by the sheer virtue of having a high performance version of Monster Hunter playable in a portable form factor, will Sony be able to see meteoric success with PlayStation hardware in Japan again? That is the question. Moving on to some third-party news stories with something very tragic, which is Vince Zampella. It was a big headline this week, but the co-creator of the Call of Duty franchise, co-founder of Respawn Entertainment, famous for Apex Legends, Titanfall, Star Wars Jedi games, they passed away in a very tragic car accident. So him and a passenger, they were tunneling through this area in Los Angeles in a Ferrari, and Vince, the driver, crashed. It was an awful thing, but they were both pronounced dead at the scene. And that was December 21st in Los Angeles. Just a tragic scenario, and also a stark reminder of the dangers of traveling at high speeds. Moving on to more Gen AI issues going on in the games business. It's been a hot button issue, not going away, as we like to say. And so this time around we had more things happen with Clair Obscur in this case, which the game did have some AI issues initially around launch, and that's kind of coming to a head with the game initially being recognized from the Indie Game Awards. So a lot of you might have seen this headline, but what happened is that the Indie Game Awards retracted the win for Best Debut Game and Game of the Year, which was going to Clair Obscur, because this particular ceremony has a hard stance on no Gen AI being used in the process of making the game, which Sandfall Interactive did admit back in July of this year that they did use some, but not much. That was the quote back then, and they did quickly patch out the visible AI assets back when the game came out. But again, this was the issue and why it was pulled in favor of now Blueprint's winning Game of the Year, and Best Debut Game is going to Sorry We're Closed. Now, speaking on the issue directly, publisher Kepler Interactive did do a Q&A with Clair Obscur's game director and the art director, and over on YouTube at SushiChick13, they were able to sit in on this talk and report back on the conversation on their channel. And so for the Gen AI issue, they said that they did use it for placeholder textures, and they missed those when the game released. It was a new tool at the time back in 2022. They tried it, they didn't like it. So once they saw the placeholder textures were still in the game, they took them out shortly after launch. From this point on, they also vouch that their games will contain no AI-generated content. And so with the Indie Game Awards, I mean, that's their stance. At every ceremony, every organization is going to have their own criteria and rule set for how they hand out their awards. And so in this case, that's their stance. No Gen AI. And it's one that I can fully get behind. I think that's absolutely a great decision for some organizations, right? I mean, that's the thing, is that we're in that Wild West gray area where some people are going to be in favor of it being used, and that could be incredibly circumstantial on, like the case I always make is that if it's a safe extension of human work and it's not being used for like the very creative side of the game making process, and that gets into art and ideas, and then if you're replacing human work, I have a serious problem with that. But some folks would argue that it might have a place on the technical aspect, or maybe being able to reasonably extend games in a way that humans could not reasonably do. You know what I mean? But again, like, that's a gray area. For some folks, that's where they stand. Some, it's absolutely zero. I want none of it, because that's a slippery slope that we're already like barreling down, obviously. So it's just that Wild West of everyone sort of having different takes on what is and is not right. The thing is, what's good is that you are going to have places that have a hard stance and others that don't. And that's fine. That's the whole point. That's like the main point I always make about Game of the Year in general, is that your favorite game might win Game of the Year somewhere. There's not one that's the be-all, end-all. I know the TGAs tends to be seen as that. But the great thing is there's many organizations and different criteria. They'll all have their own set of rules and criteria, and that's the great thing about the place that we're in. There's always, if you want to see something, you can usually go out and find it. Somebody's going to be doing something that will confirm what you want out of the scenario. But with that in mind, for Sandfall, I like that was like also the approach they took as well, which is it's very new, early technology. We wanted to try it out. Turns out we didn't really care for it. The issue is that for a game where there's a lot of people on staff, even Sandfall might not be a massive studio compared to others, but you're still talking about dozens of people, and so things can absolutely slip through the cracks. You find out, oh, this placeholder texture is still there, patch it out immediately, and that's the right call, right? I mean, that's the thing. Teams are going to experiment. And that actually segues nicely into our next news story, which is for Larian and the CEO, Swinvinka, where they were able to provide an update on the whole ongoing controversy that they went through. And so over on their personal X account, about the recent events, they were trying to address those creative concerns, saying, quote, "Larian's DNA is agency. Everything we work towards is to the benefit of our teams, games, and players. A better workday and a better game. Our successes come from empowering people to work in their own way and bring the best out of their skill and craft, so that we can make the best RPGs we can possibly make. In that context, it would be irresponsible for us to not evaluate new technologies. However, our processes are always evolving, and where they are not efficient or fail to align with who we are, we will make changes." Now, with all that said, he also announced after the holiday break, they'll be holding an AMA with the different departments at the studio to answer questions about not only Divinity, but their development process directly as well. And I would safely expect that they will get grilled hardcore, which is expected. Now, it's going to be very fascinating to see how they navigate that, because people are not going to hold back even remotely. Even the replies are pretty brutal as people are concerned of like, hey, you didn't even bother saying that you're not going to say no to Gen AI, right? They're not outright denying that they will still explore it in some manner. The very quote that I just shared implies that it would be irresponsible of us. That's where the position they're coming from, is that they still very much intend on evaluating it and where it falls in their own development pipeline. And that's the other thing too, like John made this point on ClickR3 recently, which is, it's going to get to a point where, because even a storefront like Steam requires a disclosure, it's not necessarily enforced. It's just going to get to a point where, and we already are there, like AI will get deployed or be used. It'll be part of the process, and nobody's going to say anything outside of maybe when just somehow the news gets out, right? Like it's going to, and that's the issue. That's what people are also deeply afraid of, is that the games that they know and love are going to be sort of creatively compromised because, hey, guess what? This stuff's getting used, and that's something you morally have a big problem with. and you don't even get to decide whether you want to play those games or not because you don't know if it's in there or not, right? And we're in a place where AI can, for the most part, still be parsed out. Like if it's a visual thing, you can usually pick it out from a lineup, but give it another 2 years and it's going to be even harder to figure out what's AI and what's not. That is deeply concerning, and that is my issue too. So we'll see what they say. I can't imagine that's going to be a healthy Q&A, but hopefully they take those questions head on and they themselves will not hold back in their answers. I would hope that's what they do. Rounding out more AI discussions, we have some AI accusations for Battlefield 6, where I guess some of the sticker icons in the game, that's now, the accusation there is that, these look kind of AI generated. So some people are pointing out the Snowflake one, where it's a soldier holding an M4A1 rifle, but the gun has 2 barrels. And well, that gun does not have 2 barrels in real life, so that sounds like something where AI would mess that up. And so, like, what's going on here? I mean, I think we can all kind of figure out what's probably happening. It's a lot of what we just said in the previous story. You know, they're not going to even say anything. It's just going to happen. And, you know, in 2 years, that icon might, like, whatever sort of model they run that prompt through, they might be able to spit up an image where you just wouldn't even know, right? And I think that's still concerning and disappointing. And it is the sort of creative process being just straight up compromised. Even something as inconsequential as a little sticker or a player card or something. I mean, I think for some it gives them the ick, and it gives me the ick. I really am just not okay with what we're seeing for a lot of this stuff when it could have been an artist. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are some of the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was indeed 30 Platinum Trophies in 30 Days, Part 4, titled I've Gone Insane. So I'm very happy to finally have that out there in time before the year was completely over, and thank you so much for the overwhelmingly positive comments and responses. It's great to finally have that done. So thank God that's finally over. So I guess we might have like something on Tuesday, maybe not, I don't know. Obviously it's the holiday weekend, so trying to not really do much and finally get back to playing my backlog of games. I know everyone's been giving me the business for not finishing Rebirth, not getting to Yote just yet. I also want to do Luminous Arise and Katamari, and then there's like Switch 2 things I want to get to, so I'm going to probably try and take it easy for a little bit, which I often recommend for all of you, and yet I myself am not living by my own language here, my own rules, I'm losing it here. I'm checking out. So with that said, our next LTPS is 2026. We crossed over episode 700 this year, which was pretty insane, but thank you for still sticking around for as long as you have, and hopefully we got a lot more coming in 2026 as well. But with that in mind, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I'll see you all next Friday.